All right. Cool. Thanks, Jamie. Thank you everyone for being here. I'll just, oh, can I share my screen? Is that possible? Okay, cool. Oh. Oops. Hold on just 1 second. All right, there we go. Can everyone see my screen? See my screen, all right. All right, cool. So my name's Marques Houston, as Jamie was saying. I graduated from Colby College in 2018, which is where I have been an assistant coach ever since, going into my third season. Primarily, I work with sprinters and some jumpers, but today I'll be talking to you mostly about horizontal jumps. Here's a picture of Bob Beeman, who's one of my personal favorite jumpers, and a quote of his that I think of a lot as I go through my coaching career, my coaching day. Whatever you do, don't do it halfway. And that's something I say to my athletes a lot, and something that we should sort of use as a mantra as coaches as well. Some background on me, as Jamie said, I went to Monmouth Academy. It's pretty cool seeing my high school coach, Tom Menendez, in the group. I owe a lot of my success to him and what he's taught me over the years. As you can see here, some of my college PRs, 2180 in the 200, 48.7 in the 400, and 44 feet in the triple jump. NESCAC champion, the 4x1, Division III champion, in New England champion in the 4x4, NCAA qualifier in the 4x4, where we ran 3:14.63, and that's one of the 3 school records that I have. And I also have 10 other top 10 performances at Colby College. Something that I see a lot of coaches talk about that I think is pretty cool is who their influences are. And over the past 2 years, I have studied a lot of other coaches, and this is part of the list of who I look up to as far as jumps go. Reuben Jones from Princeton University, Boo Schexnayder, who was obviously one of the greatest coaches in NCAA history from LSU, Dan Pfaff, same thing, Keba Tolbert, who's also a Colby grad, Randy Huntington, who coached Mike Powell, the long jump world record holder, and now coaches in China, and then David Cusano, who is my the head coach at Colby College and coached me through my college career. So I just want to start things off by saying that when we watch jumpers, we notice one really big thing about them is that they're really, really fast. And so I think one of the key components that often gets overlooked in long jump and triple jump is the speed factor. You can be really bouncy and have really good hops, but without speed, you can't really go far. And with that comes the combination of speed and strength. So those two things have to work together on the runway in order for you to go far in your jumps. Athletes have to be able to learn to sprint first and then integrate proper sprint mechanics into what they do. And the speed in sprint mechanics and how you go about it is very different than how you would do it in, say, like a 100-meter dash. It's a much more controlled sprint. You're not like straining and all over the place, and it's not really all out of whack. And so the best thing to do when you're learning this and learning sprint mechanics is to first teach them basic sprint mechanics, like staying tall, having good posture, striking underneath the hips when you're running, good front side mechanics, that sort of thing. And then as you're working through your approaches or moving them into long jump or triple jump, whatever you see fit for them, really working with them to break down the approach into parts and then work on the whole thing as time goes on, because individually the Excel phase, the Max V phase, and the takeoff phase are very complex things. So in order for especially a high school student to understand those things, they really need to work on that. And I think that that is something that is often overlooked, even at the college level, is really the three individual parts of the approach, and really working on those things individually. And then posture and action at appropriate distances. So working on long and short approaches, even no approaches, are accurate and help you with working on things such as posture, because without posture, you're not going to jump very far at all. So in the Excel phase, there are these 5 key components that I see as being very important: pushing, posture, projection or flight, depending how you look at it, and rhythm, and also elasticity, which leads to better max V. Pushing is what helps you generate momentum. Posture is just being aligned, having your head, your hips, your knees, your ankles aligned during different points of the Excel, especially when you first push off into that first step. Having everything aligned is really important, and different postures lead to different outcomes. So if your posture is out of whack, you're probably going to be bouncing all over the place on the runway, or you're going to be stuck down too much. And then there's projection or flight, which is what is helping you displace your body from one step to the next and keeping your feet on the ground for as little as possible throughout the run, down the runway. And so I think another thing along with this is that I should talk about is probably the difference between quickness and actual speed during the Excel phase. Like, I think that a lot of coaches think of quickness as being a speed indicator, but when it comes to sprinting, it's not necessarily the same thing, and you have to think about those things differently in a lot of different ways, and that's a whole different conversation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that if you have any. And then rhythm throughout the run is going to build gradually. Through the Excel phase, it's going to be lots of pushes, and it's going to be very long rhythm, but then you're going to develop a different rhythm that's much more consistent as you move into the max V or max V part of the approach. And I think along with this, in the Excel phase is one thing that a lot of coaches do talk about is like staying down, and that's sort of like the antithesis of what you want in your approach. You don't want to stay down. You want to gradually like build up to a tall position, but don't stay down, because staying down is not helping you develop any speed. It helps you get in that right position for the first step and really align your body correctly from head to toe, just in a straight line. But anything past that is not helping you build any speed. Again, sprint work is the most important part of the jump. Good mechanics, good foot contact, and a lot of things that I think that are important that I tell my athletes is to really start these things, these good mechanics, in the warm-up. Because if you're not doing it in the warm-up, you're probably not going to do it during the jump. So doing everything from A skips, B skips, bounds, strides, that sort of thing, anything to really work on those basic mechanics, just to really get your body warmed up and used to doing those movements on meet day, are really important. And I think the biggest thing that you'll see, especially what we see when we have incoming athletes coming from high school, is we see lots of toesy runners, people who run either on their toes or with their toes pointed down, which is not what you want. You really want a dorsiflexed foot. As you can see in the picture, toes kind of pointed up, and so that when you hit the ground, you can strike on a full foot and really develop put as much force as you possibly can into the ground. When you hit the ground, you're putting 8 to 22 times your body weight into the ground in force. So you want to get as much of that as possible. And on a dorsiflex foot is how you're going to get the most of that. And tech drills will help with that. A skips, B skips, that sort of thing. I'll talk about those later. And the presentation. And another thing is that dorsiflexion will also help negate reaching when you're running. Really making sure that your foot is hitting underneath you. If you're reaching, it's like slamming the brakes when you're going down the runway. If your foot's out in front of you, you have to break that force just to keep going forward. So really watch out to make sure that when your athlete is going down the runway, really make sure that they have that dorsiflex foot so that they can maximize their horizontal force and vertical force to go down the runway as fast as possible in a controlled manner to go as far as possible into the pit. Like I said, posture is another really good thing. Here's a really good picture of what posture should look like in the excel phase of the approach. This is what you want to see when they come out of their, however it is that they start. Some jumpers start different ways. I don't coach my jumpers on how they should start. Some people like to walk into it. Some people like to do a little hop into it. Some people just rock back and forth. Whatever it is that the athlete wants to do, as long as I see this when they push out of it, this is that's fine with me. So what you really want to see is, I think what a lot of athletes miss out on is pushing off of the back foot is what you really want to see. And that you can see the same thing in blocks. Like not all athletes push off of the back block the same way they're pushing off the front one, but most of your force is going to come off of that back foot. So really push off that back foot to extend your whole body and get that alignment from your ankles to your hips to your head. And then that big arm split, that big leg split is what you really want to see in developing force, because that first step can really dictate what the rest of your approach is going to look like. So that's really important to work on. So there are 3 different phases to the actual approach, and that's for long and triple jump. First is the drive phase. It's going to have a really slow, long rhythm, really big body angles and high levels of displacement. So you're going to see really big movements before they come tall. They're still going to be at that lower angle like you see in the picture before. Then the continuation phase is where they kind of start to move into max V. They start to move up, really have vertical posture, and they're really starting to hit top speed. They're not quite there yet, but they're approaching on it and working on it. Then there's the transition phase, which is where they're preparing for takeoff. And this is really important to sorry, my bad. This is really important during the transition phase to make sure that the athlete is at max V at this point, because if you're not at max V when you're hitting your penultimate step, you're not going to be able to properly shift that horizontal force into the pit correctly. And so speed to the board is going to be, like I was saying, it's one of the most important parts. And so working on max V is going to be huge with your athletes. Working on doing things like 10-meter flies or just run-throughs in general are really important, making sure that they're bringing speed to the board but still under control. When your athlete's coming into the board, make sure that their head is up. If your head is down, that is increasing deceleration. And then they're going to want to reach slightly on the last step to drop their center of gravity and put it behind their front foot, so they are going to want to reach a little bit, as you can see, on the last step, on their penultimate step, to drop their center of gravity. And then when they're going off the board, they're going to want to lift their hips again. So going into this penultimate step, there's going to be a lot of movement at the hips, which is really important to maximizing flight in these situations. And the takeoff direction that you're going to want to see, or the angle, is going to be 18 to 25 degree, is going to be an 18 to 25 degree angle, which is slightly different than what you're going to want to see in triple jump. But you're going to want to really like see a combination of vertical force and also horizontal trajectory in these situations. And so this is a video of Mike Powell. Sort of shows a combination of all of these things, him bringing speed into the board, and also really watch how his hips drop when he goes into his takeoff. And that's probably the most important thing that you'll take away from this, is just watching the hip drop. Right. So those last 2 to 3 steps are really important for you to be able to drop the hips down, really take off. And it's hard to teach this to a lot of different athletes, especially if they have a basketball background, because someone who's used to just like doing a layup or dunking a basketball, like they're really used to really dropping their hips. And really doing a takeoff like that, but that slows down, that decelerates too much in a lot of different situations. So what you're going to want to do is really see that slight drop in the hips and that big trajectory moving forward throughout the jump and the landing. Triple jump, the approach phases are the same. Posture is identical prior to the takeoff, so you still want to see really tall striking underneath the hips, and that the difference is going to be the differences are going to be the takeoff. The trajectory at takeoff is only 11 to 15 degrees, so it's much more flat. You don't drop the hips, and you really want to make sure that your torso is staying vertical. Don't lean back or tilt your head, because that forces your hips to spill forward or backward, which is going to cause you to decelerate either way. And then unlike in long jump, it's all about that penultimate step, which is creating force. But triple jump, you have a much longer time on the board, and you really want to push aggressively off of the board as well. So here's a good graphic right here of what displacement off of the board should look like. It's a lot different than what you would want from long jump. You want to make sure that the jumper's body is past the board before the foot actually leaves the board, sort of like a pendulum. It's a really important part of the jump. So make sure that that's happening, and is a really important part of the first part of the takeoff. The hop phase is the first part of the jump. The free leg should drive forward, come up at 90 degrees. And so you should really work on your athlete driving up that knee as hard as they can, and bringing it to that 90-degree angle before the back foot actually leaves the board. And that will help you create a lot more force going forward and help you really carry the speed that you've built from the approach and bring it into the actual jump. The free leg cycle, this is a contentious point for a lot of coaches, is the free leg cycle, which is the actual cycle that you see in triple jump during this phase. I personally don't coach the cycle, because lots of high school coaches will coach the cycle in some way or another. And if a triple jumper is a triple jumper, they've probably seen how elite jumpers cycle their leg. So I don't coach that, mostly because if you have proper mechanics and you are really pushing your leg through like you're supposed to, the free leg through the way you're supposed to, it should automatically cycle the other leg through the way it's supposed to, and then So that's why I don't coach it. And then another important part of this is making sure you're not pulling your foot off the board too early. If you pull your foot off the board too early, that will increase deceleration, which forces you to slow down. And through triple jump, you want to carry as much speed through the jump as possible. And also when you're taking off from the board, it's not like in long jump. In long jump, when you go into the penultimate step, you want that front foot to be about between like 4 to 5 inches in front of the hips, in front of your center of mass. But when you're taking off in long jump, in triple jump, you really want to make sure that foot is landing directly underneath the center of mass to optimize the takeoff angle and really make sure that you're carrying as much speed through as possible. The step phase, and so you really want to see an extended position and low recovery to help maintain your posture as much throughout it. Pelvic alignment is going to be a really crucial part of this and something that you can work on with your athletes through various different drills that I'll talk about later. But pelvic alignment is going to really make sure that your athlete is hitting proper postures, getting those good shapes and really good movement. And if your hips are straight, that really dictates a jumper's ability, even from jump to jump, to hold different positions while in flight. If the hips are tilted down, they're not going to be able to hold that front leg up as much. And if their hips are back, if the hips are tilted back, that's going to increase. That's going to be the reason for like really high first phase, which is not what you want. And like it says here, the short phase, a short step phase means that you were probably too high on your first phase, which is usually a result of trying to jump too far on the first phase. Just because a long jumper can long jump 21 feet, say, doesn't mean that they should try to go to 21 feet in the first phase of their triple jump. Lots of research shows that optimal distribution of a triple jump should be 35% of the jump in the first phase, 30% in the second phase, and then 35% again in the third phase, with a little bit of deviation either way. But it's a pretty straightforward distribution. So most of these phases are going to be pretty identical in length. So that's really good to think about and something you should really work on in this situation, and especially with your athletes. And I think that another thing that we work on our athletes a lot with is telling them to really enjoy the flight and be patient, especially during this phase. Like, this phase is easy to mess up. It's easy to do wrong. It's easy to make it short. So when they strike underneath their center of mass in the hop phase, really make sure that they're pushing and holding those positions for as long as they can in the step phase, and just holding that knee at a 90-degree angle for as long as they can. And then at the right time, and this takes a lot of timing, practice, and so on, really making sure that they're extending that front leg and pulling it back and striking underneath the body to maintain their horizontal force and their speed for as much as possible. And if something's wrong with the step phase, if it's short, if it's high, something like that, if postures aren't right, most of the time it's not something that they actually did in this phase that was wrong. It was something that happened at takeoff or in the hop phase. And so you need to know how to notice those errors accordingly. And last is the jump phase. So naturally, by this point in the jump, deceleration will start to occur. That's why you need to make sure that ground contact is really happening and at a high level and really effectively. because if you're not, then that's going to increase deceleration, and then you're going to it's going to apply a lot of force to the joints, which hurts a lot when you're applying 8 to 22 times your body weight of force into the ground. That can put a lot of pain in your joints. So really making sure that they have that good ground contact underneath the hips is going to be really key. And applying force under the hips to propel the jumper horizontally and land in the pit is really key, especially in triple jump. And it can be really hard. And if you can have as much speed as possible behind you when you're doing this, when you're going through the jump, it's going to make propelling yourself farther easier going into the jump phase. And so this is a video of Will Clay, one of my favorite triple jumpers. He does a really great job of carrying his speed all the way throughout the jump and holding these postures really well. So we can take a look at that just sort of to visualize what a good triple jump should look like. Right. So, as you can see, he really, like, as I was saying earlier, like, he's really enjoying the flight. He's really holding those postures and making sure that they're really well, keeping the hips up straight, keeping his hips aligned with his shoulders all the way throughout the jump, even into when he's landing into the pit, which is really important. And as you've probably noticed, I didn't really talk about landing. There's a lot of different types of landings that you can coach. And I think that each coach can pick how they want their athletes to land accordingly. But I don't personally coach the landing, especially early on, just because it's an added extra thing. Like if you're teaching a hitch to a long jumper, that can be really confusing and hard for them to understand and really take full advantage of. So really breaking this down by the approach and the jump first, and then as they really start to thrive in those things, then teach the landing later on is usually the approach that I take. So there are a large variety of speed tech drills that you can do to work on the sort of postures that we were talking about with the approach. And some of these can even be done in the warm-up or in practice. We tend to do these on general days, which are like recovery days for us, where we might do like some body weight circuits or something. First is a skip, which you can see over here on the top right. Really helps you to focus on that, getting that knee at a 90-degree angle, good front side mechanics, and that foot dorsiflexion. B skip is the same as an A skip, except it has more of a cyclical action where you really pull that foot back and strike it underneath the hips and get that good ground contact, similar to what you would want to do if you were in a triple jump and striking underneath the hips in between bounds. A skip pizza box is the same as A skip. We call it that at Colby. The only difference is you really you hold your arms straight out in front of you like you were holding a pizza box, and do A skip. It just really reinforces having that good vertical posture and that positive alignment all the way throughout. There's also fast leg that you can do, which is it's like sort of short straight leg bounds and then bring your legs around in a cyclical action and really strike underneath yourself, underneath the hips. It really helps athletes to really get used to that little boost of moving forward that you can get from striking underneath your hips and applying force into the ground. You can also do that. You can do that single leg. For jumpers, that tends to be good, especially on like their jumping leg, whatever one that may be, whatever their takeoff leg might be. You can also use forms of resistance are really good. I'm a big fan of bullet belts, which you can see in the picture, which really emphasize the sort of driving and pushing phase that you need in the excel phase, and really the sort of posture that you need, but also adding resistance for a strength component. You can also use sleds for working on acceleration, which helps with strength as well. And if you don't have either one of those things, hills are also really great. Most kids don't like running hills, but they can be really great for jumpers and building speed and giving you the resistance that you need at appropriate times. Multi-throws, which can be done with a medicine ball or a shot put. We usually do them with an 8-pound shot put. So these are just like general throws. Like you can either throw them between your legs vertically, you can throw them between your legs forward, or you can throw them over your head backward. These are really great for coordination and building strength and sort of that sort of coordination and strength that you need between different muscle groups in order to really excel through different sprint mechanics. And each one works on different muscle groups accordingly. Straight leg bounds are also really great in helping athletes to really strike under themselves and push themselves forward and get that horizontal force as much as possible, really striking underneath. You can do these for really short distances, if you're really working on an Excel day, you might do these for like 10 meters. For max V, you could do these for like a little sprint tech on max V days, extend it out to 30. And for people who might coach 400 runners, these are also great for 400 runners. And you can extend those all the way out to 90 or 100 meters if you wanted to. It's a really great way to learn how to strike underneath the body and propel yourself forward while really maintaining those proper postures all the way throughout. Jump tech, there's a lot of different variations that you can do for jumping. These are some of my favorites. Short approaches are something that we will do for a majority of the season. It's very rare that we will do a full approach. In practice, short approaches off of 3 steps are really, really great and help you, especially on takeoff and your mechanics in the air, especially for triple jump through the phases. 2-box drill, I really like 2-box drill for working on the penultimate. For this, you need 2 boxes that are about 4 or 5 inches high, and put them probably 6 or 7 feet apart. And so when a long jumper is running through, they step on the first box, and the key is to put a foot down as fast as they can in between the boxes, and then take off from the second box and go into the pit as they normally would. This really helps them get used to that really weird sensation that is the penultimate step, and how it's supposed to feel, and what it's supposed to feel like when your hips drop and you take off and really project yourself vertically and horizontally into the pit. Alternating bounds are great for both jumpers. You can also use bounds for testing to really see how strength is increasing, but it's also a really good indicator of posture and helps you to work on posture. You can do alternating bounds for different distances. So say you put cones up at 30 meters, how few bounds can you get in between those two cones. And so that can be useful in testing and showing how they're improving in their bounds. And it also gives you an opportunity to watch their mechanics, really applying force under the body and maintaining those postures. Speed bounds are really great for triple jumpers in particular, because it helps them helps them working on carrying speed through their bounds. So what you would do here is you set up like a 10 to 20 meter fly zone. They run in, and then at the second cone, they just start bounding and go for however long you think is fit. Usually we do about 30 meters. Continuous takeoff is a really low impact drill, but really effective. Really just like you take 2 or 3 steps, do a takeoff, just like literally just pushing yourself vertically, 2 or 3 steps, push yourself vertically. Just really good for practicing penultimate step. Left, right is really great, or right, left. It depends on what your triple jumper, what their takeoff foot is. Really gets them used to moving their jump leg in the right way, really making those cyclical motions and striking underneath them. And also just like is a isometric exercise that really helps build strength. I'm a really big fan of standing triple jump for my triple jumpers. It's a really good indicator of strength and really good for testing their progress throughout the season. I'll usually do it at the beginning of the season, see where they're at, and then every like 4 or 5 weeks do it again, see where they're at. I understand that high school seasons are much shorter, so you might get these in a couple times, but they're still really effective indicators of progress as far as triple jump goes. And then even just run throughs are really great. The more practice that an athlete can get on the runway, the better. I can't say that enough. There will be some days of practice where we might have kids do 2 or 3 run throughs and they might not ever jump, and then that's it. That's their practice for the day. Run throughs can be really good indicators of how kids are going to do during competitions, especially during the like higher competition seasons, like when New England's and that sort of thing is coming around. Just helps you really see how they are maintaining speed and maintaining control going down the runway, which can be very useful for you to very useful information for you as a coach. And then this is really important for all coaches, just like, and this is something that I had to learn very early on, is that you have to get a really good eye for what you're watching. You have to like really dissect things, really know what you're watching, how to see different movements. My head coach at Colby told me very early on that coaches need reps too, really practicing, watching things, watching intently. And so I did this by starting really, really local, like picking one thing to watch and watching that for the entire practice. So that might be the hips, that might be the knee drive, just watching that every single person all the way through. And then as you get better at watching that, watching something else, and then building your way up to the whole thing. And some people get really good at like Boo, Shaq Snyder, and Keba Tolbert. They're really great at watching just the whole thing and seeing everything all at once, which is really amazing to watch. And football mentality, just like watch loads of film. If you have access to film your kids, just do that and watch it diligently. It helps you track their progress over time. And the more you watch it, the more you're going to understand their mechanics and what they're doing wrong. And you can really individualize workouts appropriately. And then just, like I said, sort of be a student of the sport. Just watch a lot of film, whether it's pro jumpers or college jumpers or your kid or other kids at the meet. Like if you watch another kid do something that you want to bring to your practice or you think that your kids should be working on, That's always good too. I go to tons of meets, even at the college level, and see kids doing things in warm-ups that I want to take to use in my practice as well. That's really it on my end. If anyone has any questions, I can answer them.
Remember, if you have a question, you can unmute and ask it. If you don't have a question, or if you feel more comfortable, you can shoot it into the chat. But if you have any questions, you can pop them in there. Uh-oh.
Marcus, what do you do, or do you do anything with triple jump and arms, and how they use their arms throughout the progression of the event, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't personally, because most of the time, when a kid comes to Colby, they've probably learned from their coach, or figured out what they're going to do with their arms at that point. Like when I went to Colby and started triple jumping, I did the swim action a lot with my arms. Some people like the split arms, and I don't coach it in particular, but you can if you want to. I don't personally, just because I don't know if one's really better than the other. I think it depends what is most comfortable to the athlete, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks.
Well, all right. If there's no other questions, I'm gonna wrap this up. I want to say a big thank you to Marcus for joining us tonight. I know. Watching this presentation and kind of going through it, I learned a lot. I've pulled a lot from this. I know I'm going to watch it again and probably pull even more in the future. I encourage you guys to do the same. We'll be popping it on YouTube so that you can access it whenever. So that being said, thank you for coming out. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.